Hello, Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, as the COVID rules are loosening, there is no masking the work that needs to be done to rebuild the tourist industry. We'll examine the latest strategy. We'll also look at the legislature, where taxes and sports betting and marijuana have been among the agenda items. And a sediment diversion project may be good for rebuilding the coast, but not so good for dolphins. We'll also take a special look at new revelations in the 2019 case of a black man who died while being subdued by state troopers. Former Governor Buddy Roemer died this week. We will remember his career, and we will wonder about the weather as the hurricane season approaches and the rainfall totals seem out of whack. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO TV Channel 26. Mark Schleifstein, environmental and hurricane reporter, Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate. And Tyler Bridges, political reporter, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate. We go over to E first for our COVID update, and are people wearing masks?
Well, it's part of the confusion. There's really kind of the three stories here. One story is the numbers. We look at numbers every week. And the numbers overall are encouraging, especially in Orleans Parish, that Orleans Parish is doing as well as any city is. And Dr. Vegno said that at the pace that is possible, that by July 4th, that Orleans Parish can hit the level that the president asked for, which is 70%. And so there's still a big effort. There's still a lot of people out to go. Now, there has been surveying of people about who haven't gotten it and why they haven't gotten it. Mm-hmm. And they found out something like 10 to 15% of the people, there's no way they're going to get a shot. I mean, it's all over with. Don't bother about even asking them. There's another 20% or so that just says, I need to know more, there's concern. And so I presume that those people are gettable. And I think the rest are just people with just like everyday concerns, but it is possible to increase the numbers. And so that's really what it's all about now, especially in Orleans Parish, just getting people to get their shots. And it's not a difficult thing to do. So on the other hand, the masking, I personally sense there's great confusion out there about that, because all these new rules came out, most of which lessen the stringency of the rules about wearing masks. And so I think a lot of people go into places, some wearing masks, some not, and they're not sure if they can or if they can't. I guess the rule of thumb now is if you're not sure, put a mask on. And if nobody else has them on when you get in there, and if there's no authority figure yelling at you, then then go ahead and take it over. But I just think that a lot of people just don't know which way to go. On the other hand, you kind of sense there's a lot of feeling of liberation out there too. That there's a lot of people, for the last year or so, who felt cooped up, and now they're feeling a little bit more, ability to get out and do things and go to restaurants. And just from personal observation, I've noticed that places that in midweek that are usually, most empty, there's just a lot of activity in the parks, and people, they just want to go and get out there. And so I think those are some of the main things. And so it's just a question of trying to adapt to the situation now.
Errol, I would say my own personal thought is that people who have not been vaccinated, I hope when they go out, especially when they're indoors, that they are masked. But the fact that they haven't gotten vaccinated yet suggests to me that they won't go put a mask on when perhaps they should.
Yeah, and I think there was some sort of hope when these new rules were allowed, and they said, okay, you can wear a mask as long as you got both of your shots, that would encourage people to go and get their shots. But it probably didn't take them long to figure out how somebody can know whether I got my shots or not. And so, but anyway, if we can kind of shame them into getting their shots, I think that might help.
Well, certainly, a guiding light is, if you are fully vaccinated, then we're being told you don't have to wear the mask indoor or outdoors. But if you want to wear a mask, it's okay. It's really up to you. And then also, tourism. Really quick, E. We had that in the lead-in. Do you had anything to talk about tourism?
Yeah, the Tourism Commission came out with a statement the other day talking about where they are in rebuilding tourism. I mean, that's the next big effort out there. There are some things. There are a lot of people that are coming into town, but they're all pretty much regional travelers. But we're still not getting the convention we're still not getting the international travelers. Now, just this past week, the EOC has started to drop some regulations, and so we may see some international flights coming back. We're not getting like weddings and special events. A lot of those have been going out to the suburbs, and so those kind of things. So what it is more of the drop-in tourists that we're getting. But just today, there was an announcement about a new airline called Breeze Airlines. This is started by the same guy who started JetBlue, and it's sort of a discount airline that flies to like second-tier airports, like Norfolk or
Right.
a place like that. And New Orleans actually be one of the hubs for it. I mean, they're going to have pilots living here and technicians working here, and so this could be a bit of a boost and just make getting to New Orleans a lot easier. The other segment of the travel industry that we're missing, of course, is the cruise industry people. We're getting none of those right now, and they were an important segment.
Okay. All righty, E. Thanks a lot. Right now we're going to go over to LeBron, and Louisiana State Police really under the spotlight right now because of an incident in 2019 where a black motorist died while in custody with state troopers.
Yeah, it started with an incident of a high-speed chase. This gentleman in another part of the state, his name is Ronald Green, and at the conclusion of the high-speed chase was an interaction with the police. There was a bit of a crash and all. What the police what the state police initially reported is that Mr. Green died as a result of his injuries from the crash. What a video that the AP, and they've been driving the bus on this for a while now, and his family long suspected that something else was going on, and the video apparently proves that now. That AP released earlier this week. The first reaction from the state police was that, hey, this is an unauthorized video and it's released before our investigation is over. Well, it's been 2 years. The state police started an investigation after about a year. They're about a year into their investigation, but what the video shows is that Mr. Green getting tased, kicked, dragged by the police, beaten by the police, and also being restrained on his stomach, very similar to the George Floyd thing, which some folks are saying. And part of the autopsy that has come out in the last day or so, the autopsy report refers to how he was restrained as being a part of the problem. Of course, calls for people saying that this is not the way we police. You know, it's retaliatory policing. The family has filed a lawsuit, a civil rights lawsuit, Department of Justice. They are also investigating, as well as the FBI, and it's just an ugly situation.
It's a very sad situation, and of course the state police is saying that they have not released the video because of the fact that it's under investigation, and that the Department of Justice requested that it not be released yet. But like you said, the autopsy was released again today, and it's just uncertain.
There's a couple of really interesting things, and I'm going to read from my phone. The autopsy listed the cause of death as cocaine-induced agitated delirium complicated by motor vehicle collision, physical struggle, inflicted head injury, and restraint. What is also unusual about that is that it doesn't list a cause of death, or a manner of death, I should say, like homicide or something of that nature. Generally, that is a part of an autopsy when someone passes away, and be it, natural causes or whatever the story is. This doesn't list that and leaves the door open for an awful lot of speculation as well. There will be more lawsuits, I imagine, from this family as a result of what the video shows, and more cries. I mean, this is a story that has made national news. It's been on all of the channels across, cable channels, the 24-hour channels, and it is certainly a national story.
And the investigation continues, because we have not really seen a final report on the investigation yet, right?
That is correct. As a result of the initial state police investigation, there were a couple of officers that were disciplined with, a week or two off or whatever it was. But one of the officers has passed away. He actually was in a single car accident back in September, I think, of 2020.
I think after learning that he was going to be fired.
Yeah.
He was going to be fired. Tragic situation all around. Okay, LeBron, thanks a lot. Okay, let's go on over to Mark right now. And one of the big projects in coastal restoration is sediment diversion projects, and a major one is Mid-Barataria. Good and bad to that.
Well, a lot of both, actually, and that's probably the problem that we're facing right now is that the Army Corps of Engineers is going through the permitting process, and the environmental impact statement makes very clear what the detriments of this project are and what some of the positive effects are. The positive stuff is fairly simple to explain. You're pouring sediment with fresh water into the Barataria Basin, and it's expected over the first 30 years to build 27 square miles of land. That's more than has been built along the coast since the beginning of coastal restoration back in the 90s. But even that amount will be reduced to only 21 square miles by at the end of 50 years because of continuing sea level rise. So that's the positive part. The negative part is that the fresh water that delivers the sediment into the basin is really going to disrupt commercial fisheries, the fisheries that commercial fishers depend on. And in addition to that, there's this concern about dolphins. Now, dolphins were extremely hurt by the BP oil spill in 2010. About half their population in Barataria Bay was killed as a result of that. They're in the midst of a comeback now, but the studies that were done for the environmental impact statement and a new one that has just come out based on the information of those earlier studies indicates that when you go year after year after year of this fresh water, these dolphins tend to stay in their family areas, and at least 2 of those family areas will be completely decimated of dolphins after 10 years, and the rest of them will probably disappear for 3 of the 4 areas after 50 years, with the only ones that are left will be a handful around the barrier islands. Now, the problem is, again, that the dolphins tend to stay in their family areas, and there has to be, some mitigation that's going to be tried for this. Part of it is going to be the state paying for a network of people to go out and find dolphins that are in trouble and bring them somewhere where they can be brought back to positive health. But whether or not that's going to actually occur, how successful that will be is problematical.
Okay, real quick, where are we in terms of the stages of this sediment diversion happening?
Well, where we are is in the midst of the Corps of Engineers looking at whether or not the environmental impact statements, the impacts outweigh the importance, the positive parts of this of the project. That decision, final version of the impact statement, will be coming out in about a year. And then there will be a decision by the Chief of the Army Corps of Engineers as to whether or not there should be permits given for the project. And if the permits are given, it'd be another 5 years before construction is complete.
So we're still looking at several years ahead.
Several years.
Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot, Mark. Tyler, over to you. Legislative session. What is happening there? What are the big things that are getting done?
Yeah, it's a 9-week legislative session. I guess they've finished about 6 of the weeks so far, maybe 2.5 weeks left of it. They really haven't accomplished anything major so far, so there'll be a rush in the final 2.5 weeks to get things done. We do know that the effort to legalize recreational marijuana, that effort has failed. An effort to allow people to bet on sports on their mobile phones, that effort is moving forward and probably will happen. We also know that the legislature and the governor have a windfall of money from the federal government, and so that money will be spent all across the state, and we'll be seeing the governor in the coming months announcing all sorts of projects. I've been writing a story out of Baton Rouge about a tax swap involving income taxes where people would lose the opportunity to deduct their federal tax payments on their state tax returns, and in losing that, they would also make that up by paying taxes in the state at a lower tax return, lower tax rate. So that project has just moved forward. It had been held up because of a racial rift in the legislature. Actually, racial tensions have been as high in the legislature as I've seen, but perhaps things are getting better on that front.
And so the Legislative Black Caucus opposed that tax maneuver because of something that had happened in an education committee.
Right. Yeah. Representative Ray Garofalo from Chalmette had pushed forward a bill that he'd been warned not to do so. That would be racially divisive. It was a bill that would prohibit the teaching of certain concepts, and he ended up pushing forward that bill. And while he was having it heard, he made a comment about the good, the bad, and the ugly of slavery. And the part saying that there was good to slavery caused a lot of people to get upset. Speaker Clay Scheck-Snyder has finally removed Representative Garofalo as chairman of the House Education Committee and has been trying to negotiate certain changes with the Legislative Black Caucus, who helped elect him, even though he's a Republican. And so now things have started to move forward on the tax reform front.
Does it look like that's going to happen, Tyler? Do you think?
What's that?
The tax reform. Does it look like it will indeed happen? Will it get out of the legislature at any rate?
Well, it seems to be moving forward. It's always hard to predict these things, but I will certainly note that if it does pass the legislature, this tax swap will go to voters because it requires a change in the state constitution. So ultimately, the voters will have a say if the legislature and the governor are willing to put it on the ballot.
Okie doke. All right. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Mark, back over to you. Boy, we've had a lot of rain. Way too much rain.
Yes, we have, and it comes right at the beginning of hurricane season as well. The rainfall that we've seen over the last week is this sort of unusual event that happens often, unfortunately, and more often in recent years during May, where it's actually things happening between a high-pressure system over the East Coast and a low-pressure trough over the Rocky Mountains, and in between you've got all this moisture flowing inland from the Gulf of Mexico. And this week what's happened is that you've had little pieces of energy that have floated atop the atmosphere that have triggered thunderstorms and lines of thunderstorms that have come in really right over Lake Charles especially, but also over Baton Rouge and the river parishes, and it's caused an intense problem. So you got that, and now at the very end of this, as this system is trying to move its way to the west, we have part of those clouds in the Gulf of Mexico seem to be trying to steer themselves up to create a tropical depression right before the season begins on June 1st. And of course, it is the beginning of the season, and the National Weather Service has announced that their estimates for this year are another more active season with between 13 and 20 named storms. 6 to 10 would be hurricanes, and again, 3 to 5 major hurricanes. And that would be a real problem, especially if we see a rerun of last year,
Right.
where we had 4 hit the Louisiana coast, causing some very significant problems, especially in the Lake Charles area.
Yeah, we really do not want to see a rerun of last year, but I think, all of this rain is making people a little bit nervous.
Well, I honestly think that's a good sign, and the good sign is that it reminds them that it is the beginning of hurricane season, and now is the time to make their plans, to actually have a written plan for their family and places to go when hurricane season begins, and a decision tree for I will go when this person says that it's time to go, and this is where we're going to go.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Everybody really does have to get their plans together, but here we go again. Huh?
Here we go again.
Yeah.
Hey,
all right.
can I ask Marcia, Mark, on your decision tree, who would prompt you to leave?
Well, that's a really good question. Since My assumption is that we will, as a newspaper reporter covering this stuff, that I'll end up at a hotel that is properly protected downtown to cover the storm. My wife will be going to friends in another state.
Okay, well, now that you have your plan in place, that's good, but I hope you never have to execute it. You know, we are ready for a calm summer. We'll see. Thanks a lot, Mark. All right, this week we learned of the passing of one of our governors, our former governor, Buddy Roemer, who was just quite an interesting man. You wanted to talk about how he became governor.
Well, I just wanted to mention one thing about his election and then defer to Tyler, who did a great piece about his career this week. With the, you know, sometimes people ask, do newspaper endorsements make a difference? And the answer is, well, sometimes they do, most of the times they don't. But this is an election when they really did. This was in 1987. Roemer was a congressman, a junior congressman from upstate Louisiana. He was running against Edwin Edwards, the longtime incumbent. There were several people in the field, but also Billy Tozan, who's the state legislature from the Bayou Lafourche area, and Robert Livingston, who'd been to Congress. And so it was a strong field. And after the race started, Roemer was running way behind. And then something happened is that one Sunday, the Times-Picayune, with a very strong editorial, endorsed Roemer. Now, the fact that they endorsed Roemer was news story one, but news story number two was that the Times-Picayune endorsed somebody from North Louisiana over two candidates in Livingston and Tozan from South Louisiana. That very seldom happened. And so more than Roemer, the Picayune really became part of the story. And I actually remember it was a Sunday night, and all the other media were making like, this is a lead story. You know, Picayune endorses a candidate from North Louisiana. And over the next couple of weeks, the other major newspapers in the state also endorsed him. Now, some smaller newspapers had gone the other way, but the fact that you had these major newspapers coming out in an election in which most people hadn't made up their mind yet really started this rally going on. And Roemer's theme had been the Roemer Revolution. And he sort of like used this as the rally point for revolution. So on election night, he came from out of nowhere, and at the end of the count, he had 33% of the vote. He was setting for runoff against Edwin Edwards with 28% of the vote. Later that night, Edwards just dropped out because he knew he knew everybody else would be ganging up against him. And so Roemer was elected, come from out of nowhere, he was elected with 33% of the vote. So it's a very interesting campaign.
Very interesting campaign, a very interesting man, which, Tyler, I think you did do a piece about him, what he accomplished in his life, what's his legacy?
Yeah, he took office in 1988 and immediately got some changes. He got a teacher pay raise, teacher evaluation, campaign contribution limit of $5,000 per donor, whereas Edwin Edwards had received a donation of $625,000 in that 87 race. And Buddy Roemer's legacy absolutely includes a spotlight on pollution. He was probably the first governor, and I think he certainly was the first governor to really say, hey, polluters, you got to pay for the damage that you're causing, and we're not going to give you tax breaks unless you begin cleaning up the environment. But then he ran into some problems. The voters voted against a tax revamp that he was pushing, and then his wife left him as governor, which was a very unusual thing to happen. Mm-hmm. And I really think that kind of got him off track. And he started doing some kind of quirky things because he could be a quirky guy. And then in 1991, his heart just didn't seem to be in it when he ran for re-election, and that was Edwin Edwards. 4 years earlier, Buddy Roemer had talked about slay the dragon, Edwin Edwards, and so Edwards made a comeback in 1991. David Duke was riding a wave of white grievance and racial strife, and he ended up finishing second. Edwards ran first, Roemer ran third, and was knocked out in that 1991 governor's race.
So this whole period of reform that everybody was excited about led to the Edwards-Duke election. I mean, yeah. State politics really took a bounce at that point.
Absolutely, and then Edwards came in and moved forward the legalization of the land casino in New Orleans and corrupted the licensing process for riverboats and for video poker. And then he chose not to run for re-election in 1995, and Buddy Roemer was one of several candidates who ran. It looked like Roemer was the front runner for a long time, but he faded and ended up finishing 4th in that race. And that was the last time he ran for office in Louisiana. But I got a note that after he was governor, he created 2 different banks. He made a lot of money, although he didn't really seem to care much about money. But he's created a lot of jobs after he was governor through those 2 banks.
He ran for president in 2012 and really made campaign finance an issue.
Yeah, he limited donations to $100 per donor, would refuse to get any PAC money. I actually spent a day with him in late 2011 up in New Hampshire as he was campaigning. It was kind of a sort of a very quixotic kind of a campaign. He didn't get a lot of attention. He couldn't get enough, couldn't poll high enough to get in the debates. But if he had gotten in the debates, you know, he had that strong message that voters had seen back in 1987, and he would have created a lot of attention. But couldn't get in the debates and dropped out of the race.
And he could really be a captivating speaker, too. I mean, he could definitely hold your interest. He's a very interesting man. All right, thanks a lot, Tyler. All right, guys, time for Roundtable Other Stories. E, we're going to start with you.
This Thursday on Howard Avenue in New Orleans, 800 block, the new Museum of Jewish Heritage opens. It'll open Thursday. It'll be open every day except Tuesday. I saw a little bit of a sneak preview of it today, and it certainly could be a worthy place to visit.
Yeah, it's really going to be an asset to this community. All right, let's go on over to LeBron.
So Satchmo Fest announces this week that they're going to be the first festival in person that we get. And we've got this big calendar, French Quarter Fest, Jazz Fest, Fried Chicken, and Voodoo, all in October. Problem is, the city has not issued one permit. In fact, I got a note here from the city saying the earliest they'd issue would be a week before the festivals to ensure that the guidelines in place at the time are being met.
That makes it hard to plan.
Talk about a leap of faith for all of our festival folks
Right.
and for folks that want to go there.
Okay.
But my goodness.
Good luck to all of them. All right,
Yes.
Mark.
So it's yet another reminder of doom and gloom. We are in the midst of termite season.
Oh,
Formosan termites are still active. The big swarm was the day after Mother's Day, as usual. Why they choose that day, who knows? But that's it. They'll be swarming all the way through June. And it's a good time to check around the base of your house to see whether or not there's any termite paths to.
All right, Mark, good advice. Thanks. Tyler, real quick.
Sure. On Tuesday, Buddy Roemer, there will be a visitation and service at the Estruma Baptist Church, and also on Tuesday in the legislature there'll be the latest effort to try to allow a vote in St. Tammany Parish to put a casino in Slidell.
Okay, we'll look for that. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening. Thanks, guys.